So we actually are joined by the Minister himself, Minister David Mahlobo. You're part of the Peace and Stability Commission. A very good morning to you.
And there he appears, all right.
A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. As we were just mentioning some excerpts from your report back, we're talking about women and children's security in the light of the recent violence against them. Just to talk us through some of the policies that have been concluded on, or rather suggestions made regarding that issue.
Well, thank you very much, and a very good morning to you and to your viewers at home. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to make a presentation to the plenary of the National Policy Conference, in which our report was actually accepted with an enhancement because certain views were given. But the issue around fighting crime, especially violent crime, is one of the biggest issues that were being raised then, to say that we cannot have a society where people cannot be in a position to walk in our streets, go to school, go to work, where they feel that they can actually, at one point or the other, they can actually be killed or they can be injured. There is a feeling that most of the issues, so that we can be able to deal with the scourge of violent crimes, especially that are perpetrated against vulnerable people, especially women and children, society must be able to play its part, because domestic violence that is happening there is actually an issue that we need to be able to look at the DNA, the culture of our society, and the values that we seek to espouse. And we have been in a position to condemn it, but there is a view that we need to be able to do more, especially to overhaul the legislation, because we cannot have crime coexisting with our communities. One of the issues that we are looking at is to go for harsher penalties, because there is a view that our penalties that sometimes we are meting out around this crime that are perpetrated normally are being classified as Schedule 1 in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. We need to go for the tougher sentences in terms of Schedule 5 and Schedule 6. One of the issues that we looked at is that when people are actually sentenced to life imprisonment, there is also a challenge that after 25 years, in terms of the legislation, the Parole Act, people can be actually be entitled to apply to be considered for parole instead of serving the full sentence that is there. The other aspect is our own legislation that are dealing with the issues of bail. Some people, they go in them, and the bail consideration does not actually take into severity the issues that are happening in communities. Bail conditions that are being put in, some people, they go out, they cause problems in our own communities, commit crime. There are also issues about the witness protection legislation that is there. For an example, you can commit murder and you are the only witness that is there. You deposit an affidavit. And when you actually get to be eliminated, then the prospects of a successful prosecution, they get to be taken away because witnesses have been killed. These are some of the issues that we actually have to, we have said that we need to be able to look at so that we can actually serve as a deterrent. But more importantly, we will never be in a position to win the fight against crime, especially violent crimes, as long as society plays its own particular role so that we can make our communities safe.
Well, let's take a look at something that has been discussed at length. We have sat here and discussed it throughout the ANC policy conference. And yesterday there has been some developments made on it. It is either white monopoly capital or monopoly capital, and the term that has been used for it in regards to the debate coming across over that term. Now, Joel Netchatisi said yesterday that white monopoly capital cannot be labelled as white monopoly capital. So just what your views are on this and what has been said.
Well, I will not speak about views, but my understanding is that the matter, when the policy conference actually concluded, it says that the debate continues. The views are very strong, but in terms of our political and revolutionary theory, we know that when you deal with issues of monopoly, it has certain characters. It talks about the class character. The class character that you have a super exploitation of class. In other words, if you are poor, you are vulnerable, you don't own the means of production, you are always at the receiving end. It has an element of race. In our own South African context, in terms of race, there is white dominance. But it also has patriarchy in terms of gender. Those are the issues that we looked at. But remember, this discussion ultimately is not about the nomenclature and the terminologies. At the end of the day, these documents are going to go back to the members of the ANC into the branches, and at the very same time, we will also be engaging society in some of these issues. Ultimately, the conference is the highest decision-making body in December that will be able to do. But I will not be venturing into the reporting that was happening in that particular commission, because even in our own discussions, we've agreed that in as much as our report was accepted with enhancement, it's not a final report, it's not a resolution, it still remains a recommendation for further engagements.
Now back to a Peace and Stability Commission, which you are a part of. Can you talk to us about the forces of regime change and perhaps how the democracy can be protected leaving this conference?
Well, we always, when we look at the issues of regime change, we always put it within the context of the analysis using our theory of our revolution. The document that talks about the theory of our revolution is called the Strategy and Tactics. And it gives you an analysis of the world you are living in. It gives you the analysis of the balance of forces and motive forces, and how the organization should be able to respond in terms of advancing its program called the National Democratic Revolution, which seeks to actually make us to reach the endpoint of a national democratic society. In our case, we have noted that in the world we live in as much as we want to promote multilateralism, we want to promote issues of coexistence of peace, justice, and development in the world. Countries, when it comes to issues of pushing their national interests and national security, others, they believe that we need to cooperate. But there are those countries whose preoccupation, including under non-state actors, they believe that they can actually twist other countries so that they can be able to jive to their own guitar. And we have known that there has been a biggest attempt that all former liberation movement countries in our region, they must be actually be liquidated. That's our analysis that we have done. And it takes very different forms. And South Africa is not an exception. When we raise these issues, people think that we are actually trying to be paranoid. We are not paranoid. These examples you will see, and they will be able to try to remove governments in terms of agitation using different forms. Normally, as I've said yesterday, 4 aspects. They will look at how the government is failing to deliver services or government failures, whether in terms of other issues. And if government does not attend to issues expeditious, other people are actually going to use those genuine grievances that are resonating with our people to do that. They will actually promote ideology. One of the biggest ideology that you will do is to be able to talk about issues of liberties, you talk about corruption, people have no leadership, and everybody is starting to sing the song. Then, but you also create platforms, because if you want to influence countries, create platforms, entities, use the media to be able to actually get the narrative to push your agenda, or use the NGOs and other things that are there. Those are the things you do, but ultimately we also say create alternative leadership. We gave the example of alternative leadership. Remember the problems in the mining sector in the past. Instead of actually working through the collective bargaining council, employers and bosses decided to misbehave, engaging what we call it workers' committees, undermining the system. Go to universities themselves. You have student representative council that are elected by students. You started to work with concerned groups. You are working with task teams that are not representing those particular issues. And you will see these images when you study how the balance of forces normally happen in the world.
Well, taking a look at radical economic transformation, also something that has been discussed at length here at the ANC Policy Conference. The transformation has not happened as it wanted to happen, as the ANC wanted it to happen. So big businesses are still not complying with the numbers given, and they are still not implying the economical transformation. So what is the ANC's view in regard to this radical economic transformation?
Well, the ANC is very clear, even ourselves from a security point of view. You cannot continue to have a status quo remaining. When the ANC was formed, one of the issues was to be able to liberate our people from socio-economic bondages. And then it cannot be right that after 23 years of our democracy, the majority of our people, in particular our blacks and Africans, we are actually not actually owning the means of production in your own country. And if this situation is not actually being addressed, it ultimately can become a security situation. It is in our interest that business, government, and labor, we work together and be able to be in a position to be able to transform our economy and make the economy to work for all of us.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We do have to let you go. You have other matters to attend to. That was Minister David Mahlobo, who is part of the Peace and Stability Commission here at the ANC's 5th National Policy Conference. We will continue to give you more updates as the day progresses. As mentioned earlier when we were tossing over to our reporters, we know that we have various briefings scheduled for later on this morning, as well as a possible walkabout by His Excellency President Jacob Zuma this morning. We'll be bringing you live coverage of that. We also know that there's no breakfast briefing this morning. We've been having breakfast briefings every single morning of this week, but today there will be no breakfast briefing. But as I said earlier on, we will keep you posted on the latest happenings at the Nasrec Expo Center.
Let's actually